I've lived in Bon Ton my whole life. And I love this town. And I've known all of you my whole life. And even though most of you hate me, I love just about everybody here. And I know what most of you think of me, that some of you blame me for what's happened. And you're not wrong. I played a part. But we can't go back to the way things were, and I can't save those who have been lost.
No, please.
But goddamn, do you leave a trail of bodies behind? You know what? You the fucking angel of death.
I'm so over Sookie and her precious fairy vagina and her unbelievably stupid name.
Sookie. I am not human, Sookie.
I'm a vampire, Snooky.
It's Sookie.
True Blood is a fantasy horror television series adapted from the popular novels The Southern Vampire Mysteries, which were written by Charlene Harris. The series would find its home on HBO Network, where it premiered in September 2008, and would run for a total of 7 seasons, coming to an end in August 2014. Now, if you were a teenager in the early 2000s, or a mom of a teenager, then you probably remember how popular vampires were. Twilight, of course, came out in 2008 and was a massive hit, almost becoming a phenomenon in of itself. And then you have the earlier depictions of vampires with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was an older show but had a huge fan base that is still very much active to this day. I would know since I'm one of them. I rewatched all 7 seasons last month and made a whole 40 minutes video about it, and I have to say, the show still holds up to this day. And lastly, there is The Vampire Diaries, which had a concurrent run with True Blood as it aired from 2009 till 2017. To say that this series was successful would be a massive understatement. It not only managed to keep fans invested for 8 seasons, but it also launched not one but 2 spin-off shows, and from what I can find is still being enjoyed by new viewers on multiple streaming services. But if vampires were so popular, then why is no one talking about True Blood? True Blood was blessed with an amazing cast of actors, a successful series of novels that it can draw inspiration from, and hunky, attractive vampires. Sure, it had its share of annoying characters, but so did the other shows. In The Vampire Diaries there was Elena, in Twilight there was Jacob and Bella, and in Buffy there was Riley. But these unlikable characters wouldn't prevent their respected projects from succeeding. That's because none of them had Sookie Stackhouse. Sookie Stackhouse is a deeply flawed, one-dimensional character. Throughout the course of 7 seasons and 80 episodes, her character never develops, progresses, or changes, or does much of anything. She is simply there to react to whatever situation she finds herself in, and often her reactions are completely off. She continuously puts herself and everyone around her in danger, yet she never faces the repercussions of her actions. The misery and a lot of time death falls on her loved ones instead. In this video I'll be diving into the many problems of True Blood's main protagonist, Sookie Stackhouse, dissecting her character in hopes of finding out where it all went wrong. Spoiler alert, she's a Mary Sue. Disclaimer before I begin, I actually really enjoyed the first season of True Blood. The characters were charming, and the format of the murder mystery set in a small town in Louisiana was interesting and kept me invested, and the world building was amazing. The series takes its time to gradually establish the politics between the vampires and the humans, and it does it very well. I feel the same way for the 2 seasons that followed, but after a certain point, the show becomes unwatchable, at least in my opinion. This video is not made to offend any True Blood fans out there. These are just my thoughts and views after rewatching the series with a critical mind. Part 1. The Lost Potential of True Blood. Before I start ranting about Sookie Stackhouse, I want to point out some of the aspects of True Blood which I loved. In doing so, the tragedy and loss of potential of this show will become even more evident. The series is unique in so many ways. In contrast to the other vampire-based shows I've mentioned earlier, the world of True Blood is far darker and more sinister, starting with the vampires. As described in the series and novels, the theme of the show centers on the idea of vampires coming out of the coffin, which is of course a metaphor used to describe the vampire vampires' attempts to join and coexist with humanity. This is made possible by the invention and widespread distribution of true blood, which is a synthetic blood substitute developed by Japanese scientists. In theory, vampires are able to survive only on true blood, thus limiting their view of humans as a source of food, or as Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer would say,
Billions of people walking around like Happy Meals with legs.
Thus, season 1 of the series follows the vampires' attempts to live in harmony with humanity and become full citizens with rights. I mean, they even start paying taxes. And here's where the show shines, in my opinion. We get to explore from the view of the inhabitants of a small town in the south what this really means for both humans and vampires. The universe of True Blood presents its vampires in such a refreshing way. They are not romanticized, at least not in most cases. They are violent, aggressive, and have little if any redeeming qualities. And while they are capable of feeling real emotions such as love, loss, and empathy, their expression of these emotions is often very disturbing. Crying, for example, is a fundamental human emotion that demonstrates our shared humanity. What is more human, after all, than mourning the death of a loved one? Now, take a look at how the True Blood vampires cry. The image of them crying doesn't invoke a feeling of empathy, but a feeling of repulsiveness and even horror. In my opinion, their blood tears are a visual reminder of their lack of humanity, a reminder of them being essentially dead, only brought back to life by magic. They are incapable of producing tears. Their bodies are only capable to produce the one thing that both animates them as well as drives them, and that is blood. To put it simply, these vampires are monsters. They are not the usual fantasy of a teenager. You are definitely not going to catch Eric, the Viking vampire, or Bill, the Confederate soldier, pretending to be 17 years old, attending high school and falling in love with teenage girls. Adaptations such as The Vampire Diaries and Twilight are aimed at a younger audience. Thus, they contain an almost domesticated version of what vampires are meant to be. True Blood, on the other hand, is free of such restrictions and takes full advantage of that. It explores the true implications of transforming a human into a vampire, the reality of achieving immense power at the expense of losing one's humanity, the loss of family, friends, loved ones, and everything that anchors us to our human nature. The True Blood vampires are vicious and driven only by their animalistic desires. Often there is little romance behind their actions, there is no justification and no remorse for them being evil, other than, well, they are vampires. And this is very believable. Humans are complex beings and are capable of horrible acts. A quick look through history proves that war, torture, and murder are just a few examples of what the average Joe is capable of, and that's with limited physical power and no promise of immortality. The sad truth of human life is that it was designed to end. Our limited time is what makes us appreciate our life, and it's the driving force for us to continue to try and be better, to get better jobs, spend more time with our loved ones, and be the best version of ourselves while we can. Thus, immortality means a life devoid of purpose. When a human becomes a vampire, they are both set free as well as doomed to a life full of despair. Being a vampire is not glamorous, it's a curse, a concept that True Blood explores and executes brilliantly.
You have been made vampire.
Why?
Because you were unlucky. Because life and death are unfair.
There are so many cues that alert the viewers to the monsters behind the human-like facade of the vampires. My favorite one being the method by which a vampire is turned. In the series, a vampire must drain a human of their blood completely. This is followed by them feeding them vampire blood, then burying them in the ground. The simple act of burying the victim symbolizes and reminds the viewers of the dark nature of the transformation. It's an actual death that happens. You are literally buried in a grave, and when you rise as the Walking Dead. Furthermore, the show depicts the death of its vampires in such an original way. When vampires meet what is known as the true death in the show, their death doesn't result in them just turning into a pile of dust. Instead, it's a disgusting, gooey mess of blood, gore, and body parts. It's another visual representation of their monster-like nature. While the series casts attractive actors to portray its vampires, the overall image is not designed to entice you, at least not in the earlier seasons, as the vampires appear to be overly pale and very much dead. As the series progresses though, the show abandons the pale makeup and ruggedy look into a more tan and rosy-cheeked appearance. So much so that it's hard to tell vampires from humans in season 4 onwards, which, if you're feeling overly philosophical, can be explained by the vampire's desires and efforts to become more and more mainstream and human-like. The True Blood universe puts a distinctive spin on everything vampire. The show is the only one that I know of that explores the idea of vampires being both the predators and the prey. Vampire blood, or as it's referred to as V in the series, is a hot commodity in the universe of True Blood. Humans use it as a drug due to the physical enhancement and euphoria that it grants. And there are multiple instances where users of V become severely addicted to it. And then of course there's the other side of addiction, profit. Thus vampires are continuously being hunted for their blood, which is such a cool twist. I mean, vampires feed on humans and humans feed on vampires. Vampires are said to be the strongest supernatural creatures within the universe of True Blood, a universe which contains a lot of supernatural species, such as fairies, werewolves, werepanthers, shapeshifters, witches, and demons. So it says a lot that they are considered the strongest, but they are not invincible. While holy water, crosses, and churches don't exactly work on them, as the show cleverly explained all of those to be rumors created by the vampires themselves in another attempt to blend in. After all, if a vampire wants to prove he isn't a vampire, all he has to do is hold a cross or not get burned to crisp by holy water. Silver, on the other hand, greatly damages them. Vampires can be held down even by a thin layer of silver and be rendered immobile, a fact that humans take advantage of a lot during the series, mostly to drain them of their blood. These weaknesses are later shown to be the driving force for vampires' continuous effort to coexist with humans. Humans outnumber vampires thousands to one. Furthermore, humans are not stupid. They're able to adapt and survive. The invention of wooden bullets with a silver core is an example of that. Why try to stake a vampire when you can just shoot it from a safe distance? UV lights, contact lenses that combat glamour, and an enemy that is completely helpless during the daytime all drive the idea that if things were to escalate to a war, the humans are likely to come up on top. And what's that saying? If you can't beat them, join them. So in summary, I love the world building of this series. The vampire politics was both horrifying and hilarious to watch, mixed with the dark and realistic representation of vampires as complex monsters to be feared, not admired, resulted into a viewing experience that was really enjoyable, and I especially enjoyed the fresh new ideas that were truly unique to the series. And while I struggled with the overwhelming nudity and vulgarity of the show, especially in the earlier seasons, I could see the purpose behind it, which brings us back to the beginning. Where did it all go wrong? Part 2. The Imperfect Perfection of Sookie Stackhouse. The main character of the show is Sookie Stackhouse, and she is annoying. I'll just come out and say that from the start. She is also, in my opinion, the ultimate Mary Sue. But what is a Mary Sue? A Mary Sue is a character archetype mostly found in fiction. It's usually used to refer to a young woman who is often portrayed as competent across all domains, gifted with unique talents or powers, and is liked and respected by most of the other characters. She is unrealistically free of any weaknesses, extremely attractive, innately virtuous, and/or generally lacking in meaningful character flaws.
Now that we removed all flaws, let's start adding strengths. Let's make Mary Sue young, if not immortal, because she's a half-dragon, half-vampire, half-angel, half-elven princess. Always have everyone else describe her as beautiful, while she remains completely unaware of her own gorgeous looks.
The term Mary Sue originated by Paula Smith in 1973. Smith was an editor who received a significant amount of Star Trek fanfiction, mostly written by women. Throughout her career, she noticed a pattern of recurring female character who was the youngest in her age, irresistible yet uniquely attractive, and extremely talented and capable in every adventure she took part in. From the beginning of Season 1, Sookie Stackhouse is portrayed as an innocent, naive Southern girl. This is clearly represented in her style of dress. She is often seen wearing colorful, short summer dresses in an effort to reflect her open, friendly, and most importantly, innocent personality. Sookie Stackhouse is the ultimate Southern belle, the poster child for perfection. But what's better than perfection? Well, being special, of course. Sookie has excellent manners, she doesn't drink, smoke, and of course, she is a virgin. Although I really liked how the show explains her lack of romantic relationships. You see, Sookie is special, she is telepathic, she is able to read the minds of those around her, something she has struggled with most of her life. This ability hinders her from ever getting into a serious relationship, as she finds herself not liking what her dates are thinking. Her telepathy is acknowledged by those around her, but is not explained till much later in the series. She continuously displays powers, leading to everyone meeting her constantly asking her,
What are you?
What are you?
What are you?
What are you?
What is she? This gets annoying real fast. I mean, I get it. She's special. In contrast to Sookie, almost every other female character around her is somewhat flawed. Her closest friend and almost sister, Tara, is closed off emotionally, angry, and has a horrible attitude towards everyone she meets.
Do not snap at me. I have a name, and that name is Tara. And isn't that funny? A black girl being named after a plantation. No, I don't think it's funny at all.
The show presents her character as damaged, for lack of a better word. She is unable to let anyone get close to her. She is even led to believe that there is a demon inside of her responsible for her horrible attitude. Furthermore, where Sookie has a grandma that cooks for her, takes care of her, and offers her moral and emotional support, Tara is on her own. She has an abusive, alcoholic mother, and her home life is miserable. This leads her to seek safety at Sookie's house since her early childhood, and this avoidant behavior continues into her adulthood. She is seen taking extra shifts at work in order to avoid going home and dealing with her abusive mother. The only time she is able to feel good about herself is when she strikes a physical relationship with Sam, a shapeshifter and the owner of the bar where both Tara and Sookie work. Of course, Sam is completely and hopelessly in love with Sookie, but aside from that, he starts to develop real feelings for her, and their strictly sexual relationship develops into something with more meaning. But this ends like all of her other relationships, by her pushing Sam away. Ironically, all of these flaws that the show depicts made me love her character even more. Her struggles with her family and her fear of intimacy are extremely relatable. She's not special, perfect, or unattainable. She's human, and she's real. And I wasn't alone in my love for Tara. The character would grow to be popular with the viewers of the show, but that wouldn't stop the writers from treating her horribly. As if having a demon inside of you wasn't bad enough. But throughout the 7 seasons of the series, she would fall under the control of an ancient demon, finally find a man that she loves only for him to get killed in front of her. She would get kidnapped, tortured, and SA'd by a crazy vampire, struggle with severe depression and thoughts of ending her life, only to then die while taking a shotgun bullet in the head to save Sookie. But her misery wouldn't end there, as she would then be turned into a vampire, the one thing she hates most against her will, by Sookie and her cousin Lafayette. And when she finally comes to terms with her new life and embraces the power of being a vampire, she is then killed off in the first episode of season 7, defending her mother. We don't even get to see her die. That's how much the writers cared about her character. Honestly, Tara deserved so much better. Arlene, the other female character who is present throughout all seasons of the show, is a struggling waitress with 2 kids and a string of failed relationships. She is depicted on the show as self-centered, shallow, often rude, and sometimes racist. Against vampires, that is.
Please don't kill me. I'm pregnant. That probably just makes you want to eat me even more. Oh, this is why people hate y'all.
In my opinion, she is used, at least throughout the earlier seasons, to prove Sookie's, I don't know how else to say that other than holiness, as Arlene displays prejudice and often offensive remarks against vampires constantly. The actress playing the role brings out the likability to the character, despite her continuous offensive remarks against vampires and sometimes homophobic comments. This, of course, is in complete contrast to Sookie's sweet and accepting character. Sookie is welcoming to all quote-unquote God's creatures. Not sure if vampires count as that, but whatever. And here lies the problem with her character. The writers work overtime to make her perfect, especially in the earlier seasons. This effectively strips her of any relatability and makes her impossible to connect with as a character. This would only be made worse by her extreme indecisiveness and lack of regard for those around her. More on that later. When Sookie first meets Bill, the show does a good job of explaining her attraction to him, at least in the beginning. Bill is the first vampire to walk into town, so she is naturally curious. Upon spending time with him, she realizes that she is unable to read his thoughts, which translates into her feeling peace around him. Sookie has seen her gift of mind reading as a curse most of her life. It led her to having a traumatic childhood due to her not having enough control in her younger years to stay out of her parents' heads, and I can only imagine the things that she heard. Furthermore, as she grew up, this problem persisted, eventually resulting to everyone thinking she was a freak, even those closest to her.
Can't be happening. How did I lose control like that? How come she's not that with me, goddammit? I'm your brother.
When we briefly meet another telepath later in the series named Barry, we truly understand the implications of Sookie's powers. It takes a great effort and energy to stay out of people's minds, and while Sookie eventually learns to do so, Barry isn't so lucky. He is overwhelmed by having so many people in his head all the time that the only solution he can think of is to take a dangerous job working for vampires, as he explained that they are the only people he can stand to be around. When keeping all of this in mind, Sookie's attraction to Bill is not only understandable, it is inevitable. The allure of him makes total sense. Around him she can let go completely and just be herself.
You have no idea how peaceful it is after a lifetime of
The first night they meet, Bill is attacked by two humans and chained by Silver in order to collect and sell his blood for profit. Sookie realizes this by reading the couple's mind and she feels compelled to rescue him. Sam and Tara try to warn her, but in a behavioral pattern that would persist throughout the coming 7 seasons, Sookie doesn't listen and quite literally throws herself into danger. She manages to save him, but in retaliation, the couple would come back and would beat her within an inch of her life, resulting in Bill having to feed her his blood in order to save her life. Of course, the naive and overly trusting Sookie doesn't realize till afterwards that this is a way for a vampire to effectively own you, as Bill is now able to sense her, feel all her emotions, and able to locate her presence whenever he wants. Forever. Throughout season 1, as Sookie's and Bill's relationship grows, she is given the full picture of what it's like being with a vampire. Examples of this include almost getting killed by Bill's terrifying friends, watching Bill glamour a cop into surrendering his gun just for fun, and knowing that he probably would have fed on him if she wasn't there, watching a vampire meet the true death as it literally explodes into a mess that covers her completely in blood, which is a metaphor for how her life is going to be from now on, and finally having a dream in which she and Bill are having a romantic breakfast, only for him to burst into flames in front of her. Perhaps the two most important incidents which should have led her to rethink her choices are, first, the death of her loving grandma as a result of a hate crime due to her associating with the vampire Bill, and second, the death of her uncle who abused her when she was 7. In Bill's disturbing way of showing how much he cared about her, he would kill him. All of this does result in her reflecting on her life, at least temporarily, leading her and Bill to break up a few times, but of course they always get back together, because death and misery as red flags weren't enough to knock some sense into her. After all, they were soulmates, they were destined to meet. Except they really weren't. The show retcons their meeting in season 3, when it exposes Bill for not just being boring, but creepy as well. You see, he was sent to keep an eye on Sookie, to get close to her and find out what she is. If that's not bad enough, then how about the fact that he arranged for her to get beaten to death so he could show up and save her, feed her so much of his blood that she will be forever connected to him.
Is it true?
Does she stop loving him though? No, she doesn't. My frustration with her character only continued to grow. She became less and less likable as the series went on. When Bill kills another vampire in order to save her life, he is then forced to make a new one by the Vampire Authority, which rules over all vampire kind. As a result, an innocent 17-year-old girl named Jessica is kidnapped and turned into a vampire. Overnight, she loses everything. She loses her family and her life is completely changed, all because of Sookie. What's even more annoying is that Bill, her maker, is not really bothered with teaching her how to be a vampire. He sees her as a burden and a distraction from spending more time with Sookie. She never learns how to feed on a human without killing them, resulting in her committing murder accidentally the first time she tries to feed. Even more disturbing is the fact that Jessica died a virgin, and thus she will be a virgin for eternity, as each time she tries to get intimate with anyone, her body will simply just heal and reset. Jessica's story mirrors that of Sookie. Just like her, she is an innocent, polite Southern girl. But while Sookie continues to choose to let vampires into her life, Jessica has this forced onto her. She gets to experience the full dark truth of being a vampire, while Sookie is constantly being protected from it. The lack of care for Jessica as a new vampire is contrasted with Bill's obsession with protecting Sookie, as he literally nearly burns to death in the sun while coming to her rescue in the final episode of season 1. Midway through the series, the audience would discover the mystery behind Sookie's powers.
I'm a fairy? How fucking lame.
This is about the time I lost all interest in the show. By making Sookie a fairy, the writers effectively make her irresistible to both humans and supernatural creatures. No, but really, vampires are unable to resist her blood. Each time one gets within a short distance of her, they lose their mind.
You know perfectly well why I smell the way I smell. What is that amazing smell?
Like wheat and honey
What is she?
She's a waitress and sunlight.
Her skin smells of sunshine and her blood tastes like cotton candy. Thus, Sookie is now and always will be in danger of being hunted for her blood. She will always be the victim, and everyone needs to protect her all the time. The show comes up with a clever way to fix the problem of making Sookie the ultimate vampire snack. In the final episode of the series, titled Thank You, when Bill begs/manipulates Sookie into killing him after he contracts the deadly virus. In doing so, Bill comes up with a plan to protect Sookie forever by making her human. He asks her to use all of her fairy powers on him, thus depleting her fairy half and turning her into a regular human. This essentially means that she would lose her powers of telepathy, but most importantly, she would no longer be in danger of being stalked and drained of her blood by vampires.
Use your light on me and you will be done with vampires forever. If you don't, there's gonna be a line of suitors from here to the gates of hell, trying to call you theirs.
Sookie Stackhouse would be normal. She would be just another human, the one thing that she desired from the beginning of the series. The source of all of her problems would be gone. The reason for the continuous deaths that keep happening all around her would no longer be present. This is beyond important. Some of the people who died as a result of her being involved with vampires or due to her fairy powers include her grandmother, her best friend Tara, both of her parents, her werewolf boyfriend Alcide, Tara's boyfriend X, Jessica, and her fairy godmother. And that's just from the top of my head. I'm sure I missed a few. Which is why when she doesn't go through with it, it was very upsetting for me. I already saw her character as selfish and self-centered, but I found myself hating her on a whole new level. Sookie would choose to stake Bill instead of using her fairy powers. She is seen in the final scene of the final episode in a happy relationship with a man who we never see the face of, and she is pregnant with his child. But instead of feeling satisfied or happy for Sookie, I found myself feeling very confused. Isn't she still a fairy? Isn't she still vampire bait everywhere she goes, and isn't her baby half a fairy now, who is doomed to experience a life of misery and death just like she did? The writer's refusal or inability to make her character, God forbid, less special and humanize her is beyond annoying. As a result, Sookie ends the show the same way she begins it, the ultimate victim. The deaths of everyone around her, and frankly because of her, are forgotten and she gets a happy ending that she doesn't deserve. And I haven't even touched on all the men who are in love with her. Part 3. Sookie Stackhouse and Her Men. There is absolutely nothing wrong with basing the theme of a television series on the concept of love and relationships. Telenovelas and soap operas have been doing so since televisions were invented, and they have a lot of people tuning in each day. Days of Our Lives, for example, ran for 59 seasons and has over 1,000 episodes. At average, it had about 1.9 million people tuning in daily, so obviously, people love love. One of the many problems with True Blood's depiction of love, however, is that it appears to be superficial. Despite Sookie Stackhouse beginning each season by swearing off men, she would become the object of affection and sometimes obsession of 5 different men. Those being, of course, Bill Compton the vampire, Eric Northman the vampire, Sam the shapeshifter, Alcide the werewolf, and finally Warlow, the fairy vampire hybrid. Now just for fun, here is a comparison of how many love interests were depicted in comparable TV shows or movies. First, we have Buffy from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who had Angel, Spike, and Riley. Then there is Elena from the Vampire Diaries, who throughout its long run of 8 seasons only had Stefan and Damon competing for Elena's affections. There was of course Liam Davis, but he really didn't count since Elena literally compels him into forgetting that they ever dated. And finally there is Bella from the Twilight series, who had to pick between Edward the Vampire and Jacob the Werewolf. Again, I really don't feel like Jacob counts here since he didn't really ever have a chance with her. But the point I'm trying to make here is that these shows and movies took their time in setting up these relationships, and by doing so, they would gain the audience's attention and get them to invest their own feelings and desires into these fictional characters. When I was a teenager watching The Vampire Diaries, I was fully aware that I wasn't going to grow up to have 2 vampire siblings fighting over me, but that didn't matter, that wasn't the point. I liked Stefan and wanted him to end up with Elena. Then I started to love Damon because the series explored him as a complex character, which in turn made me want Elena to end up with him instead. And here lies the problem with Sookie and her harem of men. None of her relationships relationships other than Bill's gets enough time to grow and develop. She never goes on dates or have real conversations with anyone. Instead, the show takes the format of introducing an extremely and almost unrealistically attractive male who is somehow still single despite looking like that. Sookie and the male character would meet, and he instantly is smitten with her and driven to protect her at all costs. Sookie's relationship progresses so fast that it's hard to believe that they are even real. Sam, a shapeshifter and owner of the bar that Sookie works at, admits to her in season 1 that he was in love with her from the moment she walked in asking for a job. He then would spend the first 4 seasons pining after her, despite her rejecting him multiple times and honestly just toying with his emotions.
It was probably the best day of my life when you walked in looking for a job.
She is fully aware of how he feels about her. It doesn't take a mind reader to realize how much he loves her, since he is always protecting her, letting her skip her shifts at his bar whenever she wants, and he even nearly dies for her. But for all his effort, he is friend-zoned. But I could understand that. Sookie struggles to date anyone she can read the mind of, so maybe that's why she can never love him back. But what really crossed the line for me was how Sookie treated Sam in season 6. When she finds out that there is a risk of her losing the one thing that makes her special, her fairy powers, she runs back to Sam. Let me explain this a bit more. Sookie is a half fairy, and the more she uses her powers, the less she has of them, meaning that there is a chance she can become fully human. And when she learns that, she has the audacity to walk up to Sam and says to him that she always thought they would end up together. Keep in mind that Sam has finally moved on at this point and is in a very happy relationship with Nicole, who is pregnant with his child.
Part of me always thought that you and I would, I don't know, wind up together or something.
Have always known how I felt about you, but you never cared. You kept me waiting in the wings because there was always a more dangerous guy in the picture.
This conversation was so awkward to watch, and it left a bad taste in my mouth. Sookie's the worst. She is insufferable. Both Sam and the audience are fully aware of the fact that she only wants Sam now, because if she loses her powers and becomes fully human, she will no longer be a vampire magnet. This scares her, of course, so she runs back to Sam. Thankfully though, Sam seems to have broken whatever spell Sookie puts on her man, and he rejects her. The pair go their separate ways, and honestly, good riddance. Sam definitely dodged a bullet there. Things don't get any better when we examine Sookie's relationships with vampires. Sookie's attracted to danger, and what's more dangerous than vampires? The show constantly reminds this audience that Sookie is irresistible to vampires. Her blood is a drug to them, so much so that when Bill drinks her blood after he is severely injured, he loses control, and he nearly drains her completely, putting her in the hospital and basically in a coma for a few hours. Thus, the whole idea of 3 vampires being in love with her is kinda hard to believe. Is it really love? Do they really want her, or do they just want her blood? The writers try to combat this idea by having Sookie being constantly in danger, and her 2 main vampire lovers, Eric and Bill, always rushing to her rescue in an effort to prove just how much they love her. Bill literally goes out during the daytime and burns when he senses she is in danger. He also commits the ultimate crime by killing one of his kind in order to protect her, and Eric Northman isn't any different. Although I liked Eric's personality a lot more than Bill's, where Bill was dull, tormented, and trying too hard to be mainstream.
We also recycle in this house. True Blood and other glass items go in the blue container, and paper products go in the white container.
Eric, on the other hand, enjoyed being a vampire, and the audience loved him for that. His chemistry with Sookie ironically was more believable to me.
Please don't take this the wrong way, but shut up.
Please, I'm begging you.
Thank you. Well, to me, you'll always be that girl in the white dress. The one who walked into my bar.
I say ironically because the actors who played Sookie and Bill fell in love in real life. got married and now have adorable twins together. Anyways, back to Eric. He is obsessed with her, so much so that he takes silver bullets for her and then pretends to be dying from the bullets unless she, he asks her to suck the bullets out of his chest and she falls for that. Naturally, this was all a trick to get her to drink his blood and he can be connected to her. Eric's obsession with her continues when he buys her house. This happens when she disappears into the fairyland for a year and everyone thinks she's dead, including her brother Jason, who puts her house on the market. This is kinda disturbing since Eric is a vampire that owns her house now, which means he doesn't need an invitation to walk in and out of her house whenever he wants. And he even built himself a vampire nest in her basement.
A little piece of paper and the only power you had over me is gone.
What do you want from me?
Everything.
You can't have it.
I bought it.
Despite all this creepy behavior, Eric would become a fan favorite on the show, especially after him and Sookie get together in season 4. This happens as a result of a really complicated plot, where he loses all of his memories after a witch casts a spell on him. He and Sookie get real close, and he confesses his love for her. The two of them have some really adorable moments together, and they generally seem to be happy and content. But when Eric regains his memories, Sookie dumps him, even though he's still very much in love with her. She comes to the conclusion that she is in love with both Eric and Bill. She does this while they both drank her blood at the same time, in a scene which left me feeling kinda icky, not sure why, and she breaks up with both of them. Sookie obviously has feelings for both men, but the relationship she has with both vampires is very toxic. It's codependent and based on a mountain of lies and betrayals. They both trick her into drinking their blood in an effort to control her, and despite experiencing this with Bill earlier, Sookie doesn't learn anything from that and would repeat the same mistake with Eric, and later with the vampire fairy hybrid Warlow. Alcide first appears in season 3 of the series. He is a lone werewolf, and when his path crosses Sookie's, he develops feelings for her. Much like the 3 previous bachelors, he is constantly coming to her aid. Alcide first appears as a tortured soul who is in love with his fiancée Debbie. He spends much of season 3 trying to come to terms with the fact that Debbie left him for another werewolf after becoming addicted to V. He never gives up on her though, and when she conquers her addiction, the two reconnect and they are very happy together. But everything goes wrong when Debbie realizes that Alcide is still very much in love with Sookie. So naturally, she tries to shoot Sookie with a shotgun. She aims and shoots, but Sookie is saved by Tara, who takes a bullet for her, after which Debbie is murdered by Sookie in retaliation. Sookie watches Alcide lose his mind looking for Debbie, but she never says anything. She even lies to him on multiple times before confessing to him when he is close to finding out the truth of what happened.
Here recently?
About a week ago, she gave me a ride to Shreveport to run some errands. Did something happen to her?
There's something going on here. Something you're not telling me, and I want to know why.
Nothing's going on, Elsie.
You're never going to tell me? You're going to let me go looking for her? Wondering what the hell happened to her?
Yes, I don't have a right to ask, but I need to know what you're going to do. I need to know if you're going to tell anyone.
Worst of all, Alcide would go on to lie to Debbie's parents about how she died and basically takes the blame for it, leading to Debbie's dad nearly killing him. He does all of this to protect Sookie, who after confessing to Alcide and worried that he might turn her in, asks her brother Jason to arrest her, in what we are meant to view as her wrestling with her emotions of guilt and remorse. Except I'm not buying that. Sookie doesn't go to the police station and make an official confession and turn herself in. She goes to her brother instead, who sure is a policeman, but he was never gonna arrest her. He talks her out of it and she avoids any consequences once again. Alcide would forgive her completely for murdering his ex and lying about it, and the two of them would have a short-lived relationship in season 6, only for him to be killed after Sookie decides that she doesn't love him as much as he loves her. Sookie runs off with Bill in a secret mission, and when the worried Alcide tracks them down, he gets shot in the head and he dies. This happened so quickly I couldn't believe it, but oh well, at least he died thinking Sookie loved him back, I guess. I don't have much to say about their relationship, except that both actors are obviously extremely attractive, and they make a good-looking couple. Warlow is one of the oldest vampires on the show, And he, of course, is in love with Sookie. Man, I'm really getting tired of saying that sentence over and over again. But Warlow is obsessed with Sookie on a whole nother level. He wants to turn her into a vampire and marry her. Similar to Bill and Eric, Warlow would come into her life by way of deception, as that seems to be the theme of most of Sookie's relationships. He pretends to be a half fairy just like her, but when she is nearly killed by her ghost dad, yes, her ghost dad. I mean, I'm not explaining that. If I explain all of the stupid side plots in this show, the video would be like 12 hours long. Anyways, Sookie gets attacked by the ghost of her dad, who possesses Lafayette, and tries to drown her, but Warlow saves her life and confesses his love for her. Sookie, who has a master's degree in ignoring red flags at this point, falls in love with him too. She sleeps with him despite knowing his whole plan of turning her into a vampire, and knowing that he killed her parents as well as a dozen fairies just earlier in the season. She is then surprised when he turns evil, kidnaps her, and tries to kill her.
I love you.
Don't you dare say you love me, you psycho freak. If you love me so much, why did you kill my parents?
I have these feelings for you that I don't want to have, but I can't stop myself feeling them.
I just assumed the way you gave yourself over so freely.
Gave myself over?
You should have trusted your first instinct. You knew me better than I knew myself. Because it turns out I knew and used you for your blood.
Monster.
I just can't with her character anymore. When the show exposes Bill's multiple betrayers of her, I was invested and was totally on her side. But then the show would recycle this idea with almost everyone she falls in love with. It gets repetitive and boring very quickly, and this is made worse by the fact that Sookie never learns from her mistakes. So many episodes are dedicated to men literally fighting over Sookie. Sam fights with Bill, then when that's resolved, Bill fights with Eric, then Bill fights with Eric and Alcide, and then there's Warlow, who Sookie had no business thinking he was good in the first place. Half of the time, I didn't even see what they liked in Sookie. Why was everyone so in love with her? I mean, she's definitely attractive, she's got the girl next door kinda look, and her special fairy power princess makes her really unique, I guess. But she is also obnoxious. She's stubborn, rude, and self-centered.
You're a good girl. I hate to see you go down this path.
Oh, lucky for you, Sheriff Dearborn, nobody's forcing you to watch. My grandmother's dead. At least you got someone to make breakfast for you. You ever stop and think about what's happening with others before you barge in on them?
And she is so indecisive. One minute all she wants to be is human and away from vampires, and the next minute she can't live without her fairy powers and is dating 20 vampires. She wants Bill, then she wants Eric. Sometimes she wants them both, then she doesn't want either. She loves Alcide, but she doesn't love him as much as she loves Bill, so let's see if Sam will take her back. Never mind, just have her date a human so she can have babies, I guess. Which brings me to the ending of the show, which was basically a slap in the face of the audience. After spending 7 seasons going through man after man and all the drama that comes with it, does she end up with any of them? No, she doesn't. She tries to get with Sam, but he has too much sense for her, and he flat out rejects her. She gets Alcide killed, and she kills Bill after telling him that she loves him. She also kills Warlow, and she breaks up with Eric. Instead, she ends up with a nameless, faceless human, despite still being half a fairy and telepathic too. So how is this relationship any different from all of her other relationships with humans? She couldn't even get through a date with a human before, but now all of a sudden she is completely fine with it? And how does the show address this? Well, just knock her up, give her a baby, and ignore everything else. The show spent 7 seasons diving into Sookie's love life and making it the main plot of the series. I watched season 7 only because I wanted to know who she would end up with, so for it to end this way was really annoying. Lazy writing ruined this show, and it's obvious that the writers simply gave up after they wrote themselves into a corner. The show clearly wants Sookie to end up with Bill, since he is her first love. And despite going through half a dozen men, she still loves him and is not over him. But they can't commit to that. Sookie has been and always will be the innocent, well-mannered, special Southern girl. You can't have her end up with a vampire, that's beneath her character. What kind of life would that be for her? So instead, they kill off Bill and have her end up with a random human man. Part 4. Conclusion and my final thoughts. True Blood had so much potential, and it's heartbreaking to see lazy writing ruin what could have been a classic television series. The show is not alone in this though. Pretty Little Liars, Dexter, Gossip Girl, and perhaps the most famous show with bad writers, Game of Thrones, all suffered from the same tragic problem. I don't hate the ending of True Blood as much as I hated the ending of Game of Thrones, but I still have some thoughts. At the height of its popularity, True Blood brought in an average of 13 million viewers, and was considered to be one of HBO's most successful shows, alongside The Sopranos and Sex and the City, but these impressive numbers would fall drastically to just 5.7 million at the premiere of its final 7th season, and if this doesn't reflect the massive drop of quality, then I don't know what else will. True Blood doesn't do itself any favors by expanding beyond its already unlikable main character, Sookie Stackhouse. She starts off season 1 somewhat tolerable, despite her heavy and kind of fake over-the-top accent.
And I get even bigger tips when I act like I don't have a brain in my head. But if I don't, they're all scared of me.
I found myself forgiving her horrible attitude because, well, it can be expected. All of this was new to her. She had never met a vampire before, so she wasn't aware of the danger that she would be putting herself in by associating with them. So she is naturally frustrated, scared, and angry when people start dying all around her, especially after the death of her grandmother. But that was kind of Sookie's fault. Sookie was well aware that somebody was murdering all the women who were associated with vampires. At this point, 2 waitresses were murdered directly after sleeping with vampires, and there is a full investigation going on, but that didn't stop her from being with Bill, and she even brought him back home to meet her grandmother. This would eventually lead to an attack on both Sookie and her grandma, and sadly her grandmother wouldn't survive. So yeah, it was her fault, but that didn't bother me as much. As I said previously, Sookie's constantly presented as innocent, naive, and overly trusting, which is why despite the repeated warnings from the sheriff, Tara, and Sam, and so many other people, for her to stay away from vampires, especially with all the murders happening, she doesn't listen and she dives headfirst into danger, which of course ends in her grandmother's death. But while I had no problems with it happening the first time, but this is not the only time that this exact scenario would happen. I could forgive her once and blame it on her lack of experience, but this would happen at least 3 more times. And as a result, Tara, Jessica, and Alcide would die. Now, my favorite part of watching any television series is seeing the progression of its different characters. And the progression doesn't have to be always to a better version of themselves. Walter White, for example, from Breaking Bad, arguably had transformed into a monster by the end of the series.
I am the danger.
And it was very fun to watch. But Sookie doesn't change into anything. The show had the opportunity to embrace how much death and misery Sookie seemed to face throughout the series into a life-changing moment for her. She could have grown and learned from all of her mistakes. She had multiple opportunities to give up her fairy powers. Had she done so, she would have lived, well, a boring life, sure, but she would be safe, and most importantly, her friends and family would be safe too. Or she could have embraced the darkness and danger instead. She was obviously attracted to all of these dangerous vampires, so she could have ended up with the vampire Bill, with him turning her into a vampire and them living happily ever after. But the show wanted it both ways. It couldn't commit to Sookie being bad, because that's not the image that it had painted from the beginning, and it was too scared to make her what she really is. She was a dark character. She brought death and misery to everyone around her. She was arguably more dangerous than the vampires themselves. But it also couldn't make her completely normal. In other words, giving up her fairy powers, because that would make her human and less special. And the whole idea of the show, or the idea of Mary Sue, is that she's unique, she's special, she's not like you and me.
You're entirely different. And the beauty and the tragedy of it is that you don't know just how different you are.
And this just reflects how lost the show was, and I'm ranting at this point, so let's just get back to the script. On top of Sookie not being any fun to watch, the show dives into so many other side plots during its 7 seasons that it completely neglects her as its main character. For example, the Wolfpack drama started as early as season 3 with the introduction of Alcide, and continued throughout the remaining seasons. The show then decides to introduce the Were-Panthers in season 4 when Jason stumbles into their pack. And then it goes into the details of shapeshifters by going through Sam's history with his family, and specifically his brother. Through Lafayette, we explore the world of magic, witches, and demons, as he later is revealed to be a medium able to communicate with spirits and perform complicated magical rituals. All these side plots may seem to be random, and they are, but they were also the results of the writers being completely lost. Time and time again, they would introduce a character such as Alcide or Lafayette, and the audience would naturally fall in love with them as the actors were amazing. So the writers would just keep writing them into a bigger and bigger role and give them more side plots throughout the seasons. And this is effectively how we got 4 seasons of werewolf drama that almost never tied up to the main plot and had zero influence on the ending of the series. In fact, after spending 4 seasons of building Alcide's character from a lone wolf to a pack leader, they would just kill him off in the 3rd episode of the final season. His death didn't have a deeper meaning, or was a plot device to progress the story further. No, it was just because Alcide was at the wrong place at the wrong time. The writers needed a way to take Alcide out of the picture, because like Bill, he wasn't deemed to be good enough to be with Sookie. He was a werewolf after all, so the writers needed to kill him off, and they did. Alcide's death, in my opinion, reflects just how much the writers of True Blood did not care about any other character other than Sookie Stackhouse. And while I enjoyed watching Alcide on my screen, I mean, who wouldn't just look at him? But what a waste of episodes and precious time that could have been used to develop Sookie into a character the audience might have actually really liked and connected with. Instead, the constant production of side plots throughout the seasons leaves no time to explore the several relationships that Sookie would have. As a result, all the romance and drama of Sookie's love life felt rushed, hurried, and shallow, and honestly just fake. Now, granted, 5 relationships for a single character may seem excessive, but the show might have been able to get its audience to believe in these relationships had it bothered to spend time examining and developing each relationship separately, but it never did. Which is why watching 7 seasons of Sookie Stackhouse struggling to find love left me feeling nothing. Except that I really hate her, and I'm glad she didn't end up with any of them. Alcide, Sam, and Eric deserved so much better than Sookie Stackhouse. At the end, True Blood would die a slow, painful death, and worst of all, it would be completely forgotten. Nothing was the final word spoken in True Blood's final episode.
What are you thankful for, Sarah?
Nothing.
And I can't think of a more fitting word to describe the whole journey of True Blood. This one simple word sums up the whole run of the series beautifully. What did True Blood stand for? Nothing. What did I get after watching 7 seasons and 80 episodes of this show? Well, nothing. HBO announced a reboot of the series in December 2020, but sadly the project never left the ground and would be officially abandoned by February 2023, which is probably for the best. The show has done so much damage to itself at this point that it's hard to see a universe where it could succeed again. Alright, if you made it this far, then thank you so much for watching my video. I started this channel not knowing anything about editing, so I'm working on getting better each time I post. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video. I don't know if you noticed, but there was a bird outside of my window when I was recording. It was early morning and I'm pretty sure the bird thought I was talking to it, so here's a blooper of me and the bird arguing. She would fall under the control of an ancient demon. And when she finally... But her misery wouldn't end there. But her misery... The... Part... Part 4. Oh my god. Okay, stop. Oh my god.